How would you define female?
Through my training in healthcare, there are several different categories for how we define sex. People bring up chromosomes. People also bring up hormone levels. People bring up all sorts of other categories. Lots of people don't fit neatly into a gender binary, even people we don't consider to be intersex. It's a complicated spectrum.
Actually, as Matt Walsh said, these are just offshoots from pre-existing sexes. The most rare one, I think, is XXXY. It's a chromosomal disorder that only occurs in biological males. So they're male, but they have a disorder, but they're still male. And it's the same. And there's actually only 0.5% of the population of the world are born with like identifiable confusing parts. 0.5%.
It's not complicated, but you also didn't define. So what is a woman? What is a female? What do these words mean?
It's complicated, and I know you're not going to like that answer, but that's because there are no simple answers in human biology.
Let me ask you a question.
You guys,
well,
hang on. Just let me finish. You guys like to bring up high school level biology classes a lot. I get that a lot, but people who go on to more complicated biology classes will talk about sex as a spectrum.
It's not.
Well, biological researchers would disagree with you.
Well, then they're full of the ones that would say that. There are male gametes and female gametes. Oh, I had one last question. Can you come back for 1 second? Because this is an important question. You said you're an EMT. You're responding to a health emergency. Biological male, somebody with a penis, is having a medical emergency. And they say to you, I think I'm having a miscarriage. Would you check them to see if they're having a miscarriage? Would you consider that a possibility for them?
No, but that's because some people don't have body parts. Doesn't mean they're not a woman.
I want to pause for a second because I actually feel bad. You know, it's difficult being in that kind of position where you're like the only one in the crowd who believes what you're saying or saying something that goes against what everyone else believes. And they're all like booing and clapping against you. And you could see it on their face. It is a very difficult position to be in. Even though we disagree, Yani, we should still be able to empathize with that. And I think anyone in that situation would feel kind of succumb by pressure. But based on what they said, I think it's important to, even if we disagree, understand both sides. So there's one side, which is the liberal side. And liberalism at a fundamental level is let anyone do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anyone else. So from a liberal perspective, if somebody wants to identify as anything in the world, it's not harming anyone, okay, go for it. But the problem lies in now you're not hurting on anyone else, but are you enforcing that upon other people? Because what if I identify as like the boss of everyone? Does everyone have to listen to me? Does everyone actually have to treat me like their boss and believe I'm their boss? What if people start identifying as actual animals and dogs? Will people be allowed to be kept as pets and put in cages? And like, is that something that society will actually allow and accept? And is that something that people will account for in terms of the legislation? That's when it becomes problematic. So you have two people or two sides. You have the liberal side who's like, let anyone do whatever they want as long as they're not harming anyone. You have the other side who's saying, okay, that's cool, but there's a limit to it based on things that are objective. And there are things that are objective like human biology, male and female, and that sex and gender are no different. Because socially speaking, people are making the case that gender is separate from sex. And they can make that case because there's a social realm to it. Right? Socially, if people want to introduce a third gender and whatever, they could do that on a social level. What comes up in society doesn't have to be objective. Our society loves orange, so everyone wears orange. That's not objective. You know, that's what they do, right? So they could do the same thing with gender, but they cannot say it's objective. We're going to keep having disagreements and problems because there is a societal implication. There is a societal enforcing of this. They're being taught, our kids are being taught this stuff in school. I saw recently that the number of the population for T people between the ages of 13 and 17 has doubled in the last few years. The studies vary in their methods and stuff, so there is room to, you know, justify an increase in numbers, but it doesn't justify doubling in number. And they always try and back it up by saying, oh, it saves lives. It also takes lives, actually. It also costs lives because of T regret. There have been people who, you know, off themselves because they can't reverse what has been done to them. And this is something that's been enforced by professionals and by their parents, by their loved ones, and by society. So they think it's okay. And they go down this route and they end up regretting it. And it's your fault. It's not just their fault. It's yours because you enforced it. Now, something else I want to mention is there have been no studies done on the long-term effects of chemical castration. These puberty blockers, there has not been any long-term studies done on it. So they're just giving it to kids, essentially. And mind you, in Canada, without the consent of parents, Canada every day is becoming more and more of, as Jordan Peterson says, a totalitarian, authoritarian rule. And, you know, as Muslims, we're not really for democracy, but even living in a democratic country, this is not democratic at all. Why are these laws that so many people are against being enforced upon us? We voted this person in, why can't we vote them out? We voted someone in that's putting these laws in, why can't we vote it out? It's so sad, subhanAllah, and people just turn a blind eye to it. This is not okay.
Well, bro. We've established there are some people who in principle can get pregnant and there are some people who can't. There's two categories, otherwise known as binary.
Lots of women can't get pregnant either.
Yeah, but they're still of the nature to get pregnant. The only reason
they can't get pregnant.
Yes, but
truth matters, right?
It does. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Truth matters and they can't get pregnant. That's the truth. So how are they still women?
Because they are, for the same reason that I can rightly say that human beings have two legs. And if a person is born with only one leg, that doesn't call into question the statement that human beings have two legs, okay? A person being born with one leg doesn't mean that now legs are on a spectrum. We can't say anything at all about how many legs a person has. Who knows? They could be a centipede. You know, they could have 100 legs. No, we know human beings have two legs. If a human is born without two legs, something went wrong. They were supposed to have that second leg. Something went wrong. If you meet a person on the street who only has one leg, maybe they had an accident, maybe they were in war, maybe they were in a car accident, maybe they had cancer, a leg was cut off. But you know that something went wrong because by their nature, they're supposed to have two legs. Same thing for a woman. A woman by her nature can get pregnant. A man by his nature never can. So if you meet a woman of childbearing age, say she's 28 years old, and she can't get pregnant, you know automatically that something has gone wrong. And she can go to the doctor and find out what that thing is, even if they can't fix it. So that proves that women by their nature can get pregnant because the simple fact that she can't shows you that there is something wrong. This is what is known as the exception that proves the rule. Whereas if a male with a penis can't get pregnant, no doctor on earth is going to run tests to see what's wrong with him because they already know it's that he's a male, and there's only male and female, those who can get pregnant and those who can't. So that's it.
Very interesting, and I think a very fitting end to the conversation. It's very clear cut, it's very solid, and it's based in reality. Again, one person's coming from a liberal perspective of let everyone do what they want. If they want to define women this way, let them do it. Another person is going by not just the book or the textbook, but by something that is objectively verifiable in reality. I like the example he gave of human beings have two legs. It's so sad that we have to resort to such basic examples and basic analogies, deduce very simple, basic points of human nature, things that have been universally accepted forever, literally, as long as humans have existed. But regardless, it was a very good point. So, I mean, listen, it's not about any one individual, and nobody should be insulting anybody. That's not going to get anywhere. We should just stick to the concepts and the ideas and the ideologies and deal with things on an ideological level. There's an ideological war happening right now. Wars are not always physical. Sometimes they're ideological. And you have to deal with the ideological level or on the ideological playing field. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but with what I mentioned before with the liberalism, and I'm not going to say being conservative. That's all I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Islam because I'm not talking about the liberal party. I'm talking about the ideology that both liberals and conservatives have, which is liberalism. This ideology was founded before like America. It's something that, or maybe around the same time, like the 1700s. And it's the idea that everyone should be able to do what they want. And Islam came 1400 years ago. And it said humans need to live by the rule of God. Not the way the church did it, because they were men making it up. But God decides and men enforce. I'll say it again. God decides and men enforce. And by men, I mean men and women. You know, human beings enforce the law. And until we live in the way that God has designed us to live in, we're not going to be happy. Allah says, الَّذِينَ آمِنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. He says, those who believe and whose hearts are content with the remembrance of God, indeed with the remembrance of God, the hearts find ease, or the hearts find contentment. And this is a very simple thing. There are studies done on this. People who believe in God are happier. People who don't believe in God are more depressed, more sad. Depression rates are going up as our society is becoming more godless. It's very clear. The studies and the data show this. So come back to God, you'll come back to contentment and happiness. Go away from God, you'll further down, straight down the path of sadness and depression.